It is 6:34 p.m. and I'd like to call the HCDC meeting to order. Moving straight to agenda item number 2, some exciting news. We have the privilege to have Mayor Teague introduce the City of Iowa City's new FY23 to FY28 strategic plan.
All right, well, super excited to be here with you all tonight. HCDC, want to extend the council's gratitude for all the hard work that you do. We see it. We know that it's no easy task. And what we're going to talk about is the city's strategic plan. And if I'm going through this process and presentation, and you have questions, just stop. We're not on a strict time, although you do know that I can keep people in a meeting until 1 a.m. So, so you might want to make sure that I don't talk too much. But our strategic plan, the City of Iowa City, we really started this process, I want to say, in January when we started talking about our budget. We knew that of 2022, when we started talking about our budget. And it wasn't until December when we finally, gave it a thumbs up of approval. That process was interesting because there's a lot to trying to figure out what do we want to put in a 5-year plan, 6-year, if you kind of, think about when it was actually approved. So I'm going to just kind of jump right in there and just give you an overview of, what this is, and is the introduction and environmental scan, our strategic values, our strategic impact areas and action steps, resources, and how we get it done. So that's what we're going to talk about through this presentation. But there are some challenges when we went through this process that we identified, as well as some opportunities. So we all know that COVID happened, right? So coming out of COVID, there are some definite impacts on people finances. Also, what's happening at the city level, there's some COVID impacts as well. Many people know staffing, the workforce, is an issue across the board. We're feeling it. We know that social service aid providers that you all talk to, they feel those challenges as well. And so these are some of the things that were identified. Now there are some significant influx of funding opportunities through the federal government, which we recognize. And so we want to try to take advantage of those. One thing that we did this fiscal year is we hired what I'll call as a grant writer specialist. So we put it in the budget, and so we're going to be advertising for that individual to come and be a part of this team, because there are some opportunities out there that we kind of need somebody to do the leg and the footwork to bring those opportunities here to our community. But we saw a lot of challenges. The state property tax reform, we're still waiting for the final word on how that looks. Those funds do impact us as a city. It impacts even the school district. And so how do we make up some of that lost revenue and still meet the strategic goals of this community? I know that you all see the needs firsthand. You have some great projects that come that you want to fund 100% of all of them, as I was just told, but there's a challenge, right? There isn't always enough money to meet those needs. And so when we went through this process, we certainly identified some of those challenges and also identified some opportunities, which was good. Our community is growing, and we anticipate that growth will continue. And how do we make sure that we capture it in the best way? And so this plan really does help us set the stage for our next levels within our community. So Peter Drucker said, the best way to predict your future is to create it. And so the city had to ask ourselves, why? why this strategic plan? And then we also had to ask how. What do you want in it? And so you'll see the 3 different colors, which I'll talk about in a second, but one of the whys is how our strategic plan provides us a guided document which really does lay out our priorities for the next 6 years in a transparent and accountable way. And we're really stating clearly what our priorities are and how we can align our time, our budget, our resources with these priorities to make sure that we're moving forward with the vision of Iowa City's future at the forefront. And then what we know is not everything is within our strategic plan. It's just not possible, but the bulk of our work will still probably be in the same order to provide essential city services, but the vision and the values as the plan should inform us how we carry out our work and frame our decision-making. The how of our strategic plan has 3 distinct components. You'll see the light green is the values, and then the blue is the impact statement, and the dark green is the resources. And so the values, you see partnerships, engagement, climate action, racial equity, social justice, and human rights all right there. This is the lens in which we will approach our work, as well as our desired end state. These values should be familiar to many of you through what you do. Our values should be embodied in every element of this strategic plan and our day-to-day work. The impact areas, which are in the light blue, or some might call it teal, I don't know, maybe I'm colorblind. But this one here, the impact area, is really the housing, mobility, economy, safety, and well-being. This is how do we see the mission really fulfilled? And it also represents kind of the focus of our government. This is where we'll collaborate to move our community forward through new partnerships and new and existing strategies every step of the way. And then the last one is the resources, and this is kind of the building blocks that will be needed to support. This would include facilities, equipment, the hands and the feet, the staff, to make this all work. So we'll talk about values for a little bit, and as you see, there's 3 values that are here: racial equity, social justice, and human rights, climate action, partnerships and engagement. And I want to jump right over to really that racial equity, social justice, and human rights. So as you see here, there are a few examples of what our city will look like if we were successful in carrying out our vision for racial equity, social justice, and human rights. So for one example, we identified our community celebrates and welcomes cultural diversity. There's a lot of things we're doing now throughout the community. I've been very impressed to see like our Asian community and some of their celebrations that they've been doing in our downtown. I call it the living room of our community. We know that Latino Fest happens every year, and that is a big, big bang. We know Juneteenth is also now a city holiday. And so as we're seeing a lot of diversity and celebrations within our community, we know that there is more to also be captured and celebrated. So, and another example that is here, every resident understands how systemic inequities have disadvantaged some populations and have skills to disrupt biases. And so it's just some things that we identified that we really do believe if we can keep this in the forefront of our mind, we can reach these goals as a community. The next one is climate action. How will we know if we've achieved our vision for it? We do have a Climate Action Commission. There's 11 commissioners that do hard work that, just like yourselves, they are experts in the world of climate action, and they make recommendations to the council. And so we love those, that structure, to bring experts, and some are lay folk, because I think lay folk are important in this too. The people that don't really know all about climate action, but they kind of know how it will affect themselves and can speak to that. And so when we look at this, you know, we say, how will we know that we've achieved it? And so the first one talks about the world looks to Iowa City to copy our innovative carbon reduction strategies. Well, I will even say that the cities in the state of Iowa will even do that. We are very bold in our statements. They still have to become a reality, which takes everyone in our community to make that a reality. One of the biggest things that we know is that individual homes will make a huge impact in climate action, and so we have to make sure that we get out there and educate folks. And so as we're looking at how to achieve this, you know, these are the things. Residents choose to take climate actions, such as riding the bus, shopping locally, and conserving energy. We have to ensure that people in the community know that they can be a part of achieving this goal. And then how will we know when we've achieved partnerships and engagement? So again, there are a few examples here that the city that we believe that we'll know when this has been achieved. So every resident is routinely reached by the city in a way that aligns with their preferred method of communication. We know that there's a lot of ways to communicate these days. There are all types of platforms that you can purchase as a municipal body that can reach residents. And so as we are going through this process, we're just wanting to make sure that we're doing our best to be intentional at meeting and making sure that we have partnerships and engagement. I think the work that you all do as a commission, certainly you all are ensuring that some of these partnerships have the support, can be viable, in order for this strategic plan to really meet the needs of our community. And then what are some of the examples of how you all can carry out this work? I know that you have a meeting, that you still have to conduct some businesses, but I just want to pose that question without really getting into the discussion at this point. But I do want you to walk away from this presentation to think about some of the ways that in your work that you do, how our strategic plan, which is your strategic plan, this is the city's strategic plan, how it really does illuminate through what you do. And so just think about that. Well, certainly, I think you all have a packet of the strategic plan. And so as you're doing this, one thing I do, and we just got this nifty little notebook that has just our values and just the mission statement. And when I'm looking at policy, I kind of bring it out and say, hey, I got to, refer to this as a guiding document, which does help guide our decisions, especially when we're looking at some complex things. And some things that we get presented with as a council, I go to that document and say, hey, where does it fit in here? And if it doesn't really fit in here right now as a priority, it's not that it's not something that we should focus on, but we have set the roadmap for what we're going to do within 5 years. So the impact areas and action steps. So there are 4. So neighborhood and housing, mobility, economy, safety and well-being. So when we go, and we're going to hit some of those, so I'll go back to that slide individually. So when we look at these impact areas within the strategic plan, it's broken down into 3 sections: vision, strategy, and action steps. So the vision is the why. Why do we do what we do and the type of community that we aspire to be? And then the strategy is the what. The what of the top priorities we will focus on in order to move our community forward. And that's where, as I just mentioned, that's where we can get distracted a little bit because there's a lot of needs. You all see a lot of needs, and then you try to prioritize based on what you're sensing is going to be the greatest impact that you all can make. And so we're doing the same thing where we have to really, narrow our focus and keep it in line with our strategic plan. And then the action steps, that's the how of, the specific projects we will implement within these next few years. Many of you know we have ARPA dollars, which has been phenomenal. The city got $18.3 million, and we've been doing some great, we've been taking some bold steps with those funds to really, really make an impact. And so I think that is something that we're very appreciative for now, but beyond the ARPA funds, we still have to make sure that we can make some impacts. So neighborhoods and housing, I know that you all are champions when it comes down to, I want to say, what's happening, the support services that are happening within the community. I mean, you all deal with housing all the time. How do you, make some recommendations so that we can have affordable housing? And neighborhoods, we have our Parks and Rec Commission that does a lot of work on neighborhoods, although you all also touch neighborhoods in a direct and indirect way. So this is how we know that we want to make sure that our strategic plan has impact within the neighborhoods. Permanent affordable housing is very essential, is needed. How do we get there? And we want to make sure that people have choices in the housing that they would like to live in, and also the neighborhoods that they would like to live in. And we know that that becomes a little hard. Iowa City is not the easiest and the cheapest place to live in. I know you all hear that all the time.
I know it.
Yeah, it's not the easiest. And property taxes, they're real, they're expensive. And so, but how do we make sure that we are doing this in a strategic way where that we're seeing the impact? We're seeing the impact, which means that the council has to, in my opinion, actually, it's not even in my opinion, we stated it. We want to be bold. We want to take bold actions towards affordable housing within our community. Another impact area is mobility. Now, there's all types of mobilities. You can, scooters, but bicycles, we have a busing system, which is great. We actually have a couple. We have we don't as a city, but there's CAN-bus, and we also have seats. And so there's a lot of modes of transportation as well as vehicles. We know that there's this move towards more electric vehicles, and I think we're gonna continue to see that throughout our nation. There are some car dealerships that are already saying by 2025, some car dealerships have to be ready to just sell all EV vehicles. So I think we're going to see a huge shift in vehicles in the more recent years to come. This is not touchscreen. Oh, there's my little mouse. Wait a minute. My mouse. There it is. Yes. And then safety and well-being. So this is another impact area. Mental health and physical well-being is something that we've been hearing about. I want to say is really heightened from the community verbiage. I want to say within the past 5 to 6 years. But I know that in our community, this has been a conversation that has been happening by more of the experts that have sat around the table. And one of the evidence of this work is the Guidelink Center. And that was a 10-year plus project. I know that Becky Reedus, Commissioner Reedus, was a part of that conversation, and also was a part of community crisis services. And I tell my story all the time at how valuable community crisis is, especially for individuals that are in the middle of a mental crisis. I have my own story. I'll save you all that today. But the work that these mental health professionals do, I think, is a little underestimated at times within our community, but it really is saving folks' lives. And giving people hope. Sometimes it's not even suicidal thoughts that people have, but just giving them hope to achieve some of the things that they kind of don't feel the energy to achieve. And just having those conversations and making, and giving, I just want to say giving people hope. That's what those mental health professionals do. And so what are, so again, this is an impact area that we believe that we want to see, and this is the evidence that we're going to want to impact within our community. Resources, I think we're going to see, go to the next slide. Resources are, there's really three that we're going to focus on. It's the facilities and equipment and technology. If we want to be able to ensure that people get reached in the community by their preferred communication style, we're going to have to make some investments to make sure that we can do that. Facilities, I can tell you that we just went through a Parks and Rec study, and we know that there is a lot of folks that have comments on what they want to see in facilities. And we also know that there's a next generation to come and a larger population to come. And how are we going to meet those needs? We're starting to grow a little bit on our edges. And so when we're talking about mobility and making this a walkable city, you want to make sure that there are certain amenities within 15 minutes of someone, and 15-minute walkable distance of someone. And so that's going to take some real strategy as well as some moolah to make sure that we can achieve those. And then another resource is people. So the city staff can only do so much. We really do have to rely on the people in this room and all the people in our community. And I think we really need to make sure that we are getting people engaged. And when they're engaged, you want to make sure that you have a smile on your face, welcoming folks, and that they feel that it feels like an inclusive space, that they can share their ideas. And I think one of the greatest things is when you can get different type folks in the room. And you probably see this here, you all have your own different lens when you come and you're making decisions, where it is great to hear a different perspective. I think it should be welcomed. And so that's the same thing that we want to do here. And then that another resource is that financial. Believe it or not, financially, the city, we're in a good position, but we know, as most communities across the nation, there are financial challenges lurking. And we have to make sure that we grow our tax base to be able to keep up. I think many people have gone to the grocery store, and when eggs became $6, you're like, what happened, right? Well, as a city, we're also feeling those impacts Lumber isn't the same cost anymore. When we go and fix the roads, they're very, very expensive. And so as we're seeing those costs, and even to things that really do matter to lay folks in our community, making sure that there are what I call it Maslow hierarchy of needs are met. And those are some of the things that the city would like to continue to invest in. And personally, I think that there can be some opportunities where we can make a greater investment. But we're going to have to make sure that we grow that tax base to keep up with our changing cost. And then when we looked at the strategic plan, we wanted to say, well, what are other ways that we're aligning with this strategic plan? So when the COVID happened in 2020, there was a group that came together really quickly. It was called Better Together, and there was a bunch of folks around the table. You had the shelter, you had social service agencies that were sitting in the table with some folks that really have some hands-on with certain communities that were seeing great impact. And so these folks were sitting around the table making true change in an urgent crisis moment. And from that was birthed the Better Together 2030. And so there are some visions that we have not only for the city of Iowa City, but for Johnson County. And that was the key pivotal point that we noticed with Better Together was this was folks that some might say are competitors in a way, business competitors. We have the same product. We're selling the same thing in a way. None of that mattered in that moment. They all brought their resources together to say, how can we make this work for this entire Johnson County community? And that's what Better Together is doing. We also saw that we aligned with ECOG, and that's, which was great. The individual department master and action plans, it is affordable housing. We have an action plan for that, which we're excited to continue to chip away, which the council will be zoning in on affordable housing boldly, and you're going to see that in the coming months. I only have 2 more slides and then I'm done, so that you can get on with your meeting. I have no idea what time it is. Now I do. No, I don't. So what's not in the strategic plan? There's a lot that's not in the strategic plan, but again, I really believe that 99% of what we do, it won't be reflected here, and the bulk of the time and the resources go to delivering basic service levels within our city. While they don't show up in the plan, they are extremely important, and if we don't deliver our core services in a way that aligns with our values, nothing else in the strategic plan is going to be possible. We expect some unexpected challenges. COVID happened. Remember how your lives changed in a moment? So we know that there's going to be some things that are going to be unexpected changes, but we're going to have to sometimes deal with those, but always diverting and keeping our strategic plan in mind. There's going to be some timely opportunities that we're going to have to jump on. As I mentioned, we have this grant person coming on board. I think y'all know about grants. There's a deadline. There's you're scanning through your email, and all of a sudden it pops up, and it's doing 2 weeks. We may have to shift a little bit of where we're thinking some of these priorities will come, based on some of these timely opportunities that come up. And then lastly, wanted to just open up with any questions. This is kind of the logo that in a glance, it kind of keeps me on target when I'm making some decisions from the dais at the council, because really this is an opportunity for us to think long-term. We used to have our strategic plans 1 year at a time. We were going every year and talk about, what do we want to focus on this year? And it's not that it wasn't great because a lot of the things remained the same, but when you can kind of do this deep dive and say, this is what we want, there was, communication and community involvement to really create this, then that's where we can really get the best bang for our buck at trying to really take some things through fruition, because you can be easily diverted. And so that's all I have. Any questions? I really appreciate you all allowing me to go through this with you all today.
I have a comment. Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm not sure that I can use the right terminology, but I think it was the 2022 report from the Housing Office. There was a statement in there that for low-income folks, the median rent, I think, or maybe, I'm not sure, is $800 a month. That's about what you can expect to spend. But there's a huge percentage of people who only get $700 a month from Social Security. And so I'm wondering, how do we make up for that? And does the city have a responsibility, and can there be public-private partnerships where the private folks really understand the situation and can work out their own avenues for helping out?
So you bring up a concern that has many layers to it, because most times we hear of people at the 30%, 60%, 90%. There'll be housing projects that is created for those individuals, and then they have certain rent brackets that they would kind of be within. And of course, we have Erica Kubley here. Brianna, I'm sorry. You're okay. I'm so used to Erica Kubley. Yes, who's an expert at that. But I think, but your question is, how can the city really make sure that those needs are being met for those individuals that do have already below what some of the average rents are? I don't know what the average rent is for, what you're probably referring to is maybe a household of three or something like that.
No, one. I just know from my own experience that the least expensive place I can find that's really inhabitable and will pass inspections for the Section 8 folks is $800. Okay, that's a lot of money. Yeah. My income is Social Security disability, and I'm telling you, that's a big chunk. I'm grateful that I received some help from the Section 8 program, but one of the issues is the city engaged with some developers to put up some projects, and in return for I don't know, tax incentives and whatever, that the workforce housing program came into effect, and there were a certain number of units that they would need to rent to low-income folks. And, that's all good and well, but my experience is the rent with the workforce housing program is still $800. And that's the maximum rent. And, I don't want to take a dig at my landlord, because I'm certainly not doing that, but I think it probably goes for all the others, is that they're charging the maximum allowed by HUD, not taking into consideration what the income might be. And so I don't know if the city has any ability to help regulate that, or if that's just a function of the feds.
Mm-hmm. So we're well aware, you're here at Often, affordable to who?
Well, that's always my thing, is define affordable.
Right, and that is something that the city finds challenging when we have projects that either come before us, because we do need some affordability on some level, and certainly, folks are within the guidelines when they, state affordability, but we hear that all the time, and we know that affordable to who. What I will say is that when we go through this next affordability process as a council, we're going to have to answer, how do we ensure that it's affordable to make sure that we have that impact that I talked about?
Well, there's an awful lot of people in Iowa City who live here for a number of reasons, but the university is here with healthcare and stuff, and that's important to a lot of people. So they live here, but they, okay, I had a senior moment, lost my train of thought. Oh, there's just an awful lot of people that this affects. And, one of the things that I have noticed when I've talked with people who are in a lower income bracket, and certainly I don't know everybody, is that, they tend to not fill out the census forms because they don't think it's going to help them. And the census forms are what HUD uses when they establish the rents for the various programs. And so, as a city, I don't know if the city can get it involved in helping people get their census filled out, but, that would certainly be helpful in helping, to make things more affordable.
Yep. The other thing is, just like this commission has your lens on affordable housing on a lot of levels, also the P&Z Commission, that's a topic that's coming up for them right now, as well as within our CDBG, program. That's something that always comes up. And I think, again, as this council have these hard conversations, we're going to have to make sure that all this comes in the mix, because we're going to have to be, in our statement, we say we need to be bold to ensure that we have the impact.
Thank you. And I would just ask that, if you have any influence with other council members, that you help them understand, that affordable really isn't affordable to a lot of people here.
Yes.
What we tend to think of as low rent and affordable. So
Thank
that's all.
you.
But thank you for your time, and I'm sorry I took up so much here.
Yes. Any other questions? Yes.
I was trying to wait for everybody else, so I only have a couple. I think the city's made some great decisions with the ARPA money, some fabulous decisions. And there's like the decision to invest in the public facilities for free medical clinic and neighborhood centers, I think was the other one, I think was great. And that's a one-time thing, don't have to worry about it being ongoing. But I also know that they invested in some projects at Shelter House to address homelessness. They invested in mobile crisis, which is something that I think we all agree, long time coming, to see that kind of investment, to be able to get the kind of program that we want. How does the city keep those going after the ARPA money is gone? Is that an issue and a challenge for the city to meet? And is that going to be addressed through the strategic plan, or?
Yeah. So a part of the rationale for using ARPA funds was to make sure that we do some once-in-a-lifetime impacts that we otherwise, as a municipality, have not been able to do. And so we're trying to get them, I don't want to say the most bang for our buck, because I think that can be offensive to someone that wasn't, awarded some funds. But we wanted to make sure that whatever we did, it can set up for longevity, for maybe even setting up an entity to have the ability to serve someone so that they can have the impact that they need. We know that if we stay stagnant with some of the things, like we haven't, raised our taxes, levy, we have to do something. We have to change a little bit within our community. We have to have more income. And so there are several ways to do that. We can bring in, allow more development. The city of Iowa City has been kind of, in comparison to others, maybe a little on the slower side at bringing on development. But when we bring in development, that's funds towards our tax base that really do fund social services. And so even though the majority of the programs that were funded, right now the city don't foresee funding that project unless it goes through the continue funding, except unless it goes through the routine processes for funding through the city. I think if we're going to get more opportunities to do maybe some bold stuff, we're going to have to figure out something. We know that we're still awaiting for, I'm trying to think of the one terminology that the school district want to use to fund fourth graders. But it's the tax that goes on our, we have to vote on it. I'm blanking on the terminology. Nobody's helping me. But anyway, well, we've talked about it before. But nevertheless, I'm blanking on the terminology. But we're going to have to do something a little bold.
It's on the radar.
Yeah, it is on the, yep.
I think the other thing that I was thinking about is, I love strategic plans. I mean, they are. I mean, if you don't have one, how do you know where you're going if you don't have a roadmap there? But they tend to bring out the big, bold, and beautiful, fancy. We've got all these big steps, we're voting on them, we're, displaying them. And I'm going to take us back to last year's commission where we met to talk about the policy, the vacation policy with those that receive Section 8 housing. And I was kind of surprised that I think there was a question asked about when the last time the bylaws were updated, and I think it'd been 2000. And I'm not trying to embarrass, and I'm not criticizing anybody.
Sure.
Only to say, I think you have to make sure that and I had to write this down so I didn't forget.
Yes.
That we take a look at obstacles we may have in our current policies and our current rules, and that's low-hanging fruit.
Yes.
Easy to touch upon, but it's also easy to forget. Because I'm sure, when I say I was surprised that the bylaws hadn't been reviewed in that long, I imagine there's some other people surprised too, that, you don't realize how time flies by, without doing this. But I think that if we look at 20 years ago, is your life the same? Is my life the same? Does a rule that you had when you were, when I was like 20 years younger apply to me now? Probably not. So just encouraging, I think, because I do think that if we go in and look at those types of policies, procedures, I hate to say it, but the bowels of,
Yes.
of the organization, with the eye that we want to see what kind of obstacles, we have inadvertently forgotten to update. If I'll put it like that, I think that's a good idea.
Yep.
Also.
Rhianna, would that fall under the auspices of this commission?
Sort of. The Housing Authority's role with this commission, typically once a year, their annual action plan will come for approval. Most of what we do is CDBG and home-oriented, but occasionally things from the Housing Authority will come to this commission.
But as we advise on policies and procedures, does what Becky was talking about,
That did.
Yeah, normally in those circumstances, that I believe was a council request for HCDC feedback. So if council requests it, then yes.
I do remember that.
Yeah, it was, but not all will come before our eyes. Some of them will just be staff eyes, I think.
And I think, your bigger point is that was eye-awakening, right? That something hadn't been reviewed. What I would say is that we certainly do look at a lot of our policies and procedures
I know.
based on what that item that is before us, and we review that part. There's some overhauling that needs to be done. We know that when it comes to some of the things that we're doing with our comprehensive plan for the city, and so we know that we're going to be moving. We made changes along the way, but when you're looking at the entire document, that's something that we do plan to do, but we're also moving into form-based codes which is just, kind of changing a lot of what we'll be doing anyway. But your point is well taken, and I appreciate that. And we are aware that
Yeah.
we're making changes, and sometimes we need to take that, step back and just look at it, look at everything comprehensively. But it's a lot of documents, not to say that is not something that we are doing, depending on what's before us at that time.
And, just to kind of piggyback on what, go a little bit farther than what Carol was saying is, affordable housing, they're always moving the goal line,
It changes.
I don't know where the goal line is,
Nobody
honestly.
does, because we take 10
changes.
steps forward, and then they take 12, and we take 15 steps forward, and it's 30, and that's, so much of the problem that we have but I think the city does an outstanding job at addressing the issues. I wish more communities were like Iowa City.
Great, thank you,
I'll
thank
see.
you. Yeah.
I'm just going to say just one more thing. One obstacle that people have with Section 8.
And I'm going to make
don't
sure that
like
we
to
keep
talk.
our conversation to strategic plan. So bring in strategic
Okay,
plan. Yes.
This strategic plan, this involves people on being able to live in a house, is that the portion of the rent that they need to pay, that the housing office doesn't pay, sometimes is more than the guideline that the feds put out that they're able to pay. And that's a direct result of high rent in Iowa City. So, where do people live? Anyway, I'm done.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that comment, yes.
The other thing about climate action is, remember, electric bikes are, I think somebody told me they're a third of the total bike sales in the country, if I have that right. I could be wrong, I'm wrong often. And that kind of electric vehicle is much easier to attain, and I'd love to see, more push and incentives and things like that to get people on their bikes, and electric or otherwise, so.
Well, that's in our strategic plan, so how do we get that impact, right? So those are going to come up.
So it's exciting, yeah, to
Yes.
see. And I'm really happy to see you have a grant writer.
Yes.
Yes.
We're excited.
That
It's
will
so
be great,
needed,
yeah.
yeah.
If they could get some more money for us, that'd be great,
Yeah,
too, so.
and our
whatever.
staff has done really good, so I don't want to underestimate our current staff. But as we know, there's a lot of opportunities that are coming up from the feds, and so we just want to try if we can have one person kind of capturing some of those opportunities that otherwise we may have limited staff time, because our staff are human.
I was just wondering with the sort of the role of this commission, because I understand that our role is to advise on different policies and such. Are we in a position to, at any point, like, discuss or come up with suggestions for possible policies that would address things in the strategic plan or anything else like that? And for us to
I will tell you absolutely, if that's what you all plan, want to put on your agenda, discussion of this strategic plan. I posed the question to you, what are some of the examples of how you can carry out these values through this board and commission? Certainly, you can have that discussion amongst yourselves. I know that we can spend a lot of time, talking about that. And so that's something that I continue to pose to you all to consider. Any other questions?
Yeah, I
Yes?
have a question. So I work at the university and engage with students a lot. So one population that I am concerned maybe falls through the cracks sometimes are the students when it comes to, like their housing issues, and they're here for such a short period of time. There's so much turnover that I think a lot of times they deal with difficult and like predatory kind of practices and just sort of like swallow it because, again, they're only here for a short period of time. So I'm just wondering if there's any discussion, or if there has been any discussion in the strategic plan about connecting with that group in particular and engaging, like when we talk about engaging the public, if we're also considering, students who are here temporarily but, are important members of our community. So.
Yes, so the University of Iowa students have a student government, and so they come to our work sessions the council work sessions every first and third Tuesdays of the month.
Oh, cool.
And so they sit there and they definitely engage in conversation with the council, and so they have been very vocal of what their needs are and challenges with landlords throughout the community. Once a year, we did it again this year. I think we had stopped because of COVID for a few years, but we would go over to the university as a body, all of council, and discuss anything that they want to talk to us about from their perspective, the student perspective. And that was always at the top of the list.
Awesome.
Yep. Anything else? Well, again, I really appreciate all the work that you all do. I know that it's no easy task, but we really appreciate you all taking the deep dive and the work that you're doing. Just continue on, and just remember this document, the strategic plan when you're making some of your decisions. Thanks again. And I'm going to excuse myself from your meeting so that you can do your business now.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Up next in our agenda is agenda item number 3, the consideration of the meeting minutes from March 30th of 23. Are there any edits or corrections to those minutes? If not, then may I have a motion to approve the March 30th of 2023 HCDC minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Agenda item number 4, public comment for items not on the agenda.
We have no public.
Quietest
Nothing
meetings
on-
I've been to.
Online.
Yeah, this is unusual. No, nobody was registered online this time either, so quite
Okay.
a difference from our last meeting.
Moving to agenda item number 5, review and consider recommendation for City Council on approval of the fiscal year 24 annual action plan.
I have a brief overview of this plan. I won't read you the entire thing, but since we have a lot of new commissioners, I will kind of give you the brief overview, and then if you have questions as we're going through it, let me know. Our action plan is a section of our consolidated plan. You're inundated with plans tonight. Our consolidated plan is our 5-year plan that we have to do for HUD. So the action plan, the consolidated plan, and then our CAPER are all HUD-required documents. The public comment for this plan opened on April 1st. We do a 30-day public comment period before it goes to City Council for approval on May 2nd. The public can review, they can make any comments. We include those in our plan, and we include like a staff response to anything that might require a response. We haven't received any comments to date. The HCDC budget that you voted on to recommend to council at the last meeting is included in Appendix B. One thing I thought might be useful would be to talk about how this action plan is different from other city plans. Part of that, like I mentioned, this is a HUD requirement, so they have very specific questions they want us to answer. They have a very specific format. Everything has to be fed into the federal database. It's called IDIS, so it's a very specific document. We don't have as much flexibility to do different things like they can do with the strategic plan. So it's a federally required document, and they get to decide what questions and information should be included in it. The format is a little bit different, but a lot of the common threads through this plan you'll see in other city plans as well. Affordable housing is a huge issue. You'll see that through the strategic plan. Part of this plan, also in our appendix, we included the 2022 update to the city's affordable housing action plan. Let's see. The main focus of this plan is CDBG and home-funded activities. So something that people can get confused with sometimes is, you know, why don't we talk about emerging agencies, or why don't we focus more on the city's just doing a lot of things locally, but the focus of this plan is HUD wants to know what we're going to do with their federal dollars. So that's kind of what this plan rotates around. Not to say that there's not a lot of other really great, awesome things happening in different departments or with local funding sources, but they want to know what our plan is for the next year with their federal dollars. We try to include little things where we can, where we talk about local initiatives, or like the mayor was saying, ARPA funds. That's definitely been a hot topic in the last year or so. But the ARPA funds were issued by the Treasury, so they have separate reporting requirements. It's not necessarily reported through these specific documents through HUD. We did receive some home ARP funds, and those are federal funds that we received from HUD. And those were allocated through our FY22 action plan. And you'll see those, we'll report on those through our CAPER reports, which say what we did in the year, report our accomplishments through that. So HCDC has already voted on the budget recommendations, but we ask for a recommendation to council to approve the entire plan. So that's what we would be asking for you tonight. And then the last note I have on this plan is I just wanted to highlight the cover photo. I guess it's hard to see there, but that was a housing fellowship project. They acquired this home through home funds in FY23, and this will be rental housing here in Iowa City. So if you have any questions about the plan, I'm happy to answer them.
I wrote some notes down, and of course I put page numbers on everyone but the one I want to ask right now. But I think it had, under the city strategies, the third bullet, the question I had is how do we achieve this goal? And I think it had to do with maximizing the impact that agencies have, possibly working. I mean, how can we achieve? No, you know what? Let me find that one, but I'll go to a different one.
Okay.
One of the questions I have is GRIP. What are GRIP funds?
Yeah, GRIP is a locally funded rehab program. So with our city rehab program, we use home funds. There are certain budget line items that are set aside every year. So $90,000 of home funds is set aside for homeowner rental rehab. We also use a portion of our CDBG funds, so $235,000 of CDBG is set aside by council every year to do rehab here in Iowa City. And then we also have some local dollars allocated towards the GRIP program. We have a rehab specialist, Liz Osborne, in our office would be able to speak more to the differences in each program. But having the different funding sources definitely helps depending on a homeowner's eligibility. So we're able to find a good fit between the funding sources. So that's a locally funded program, to answer your question.
What does GRIP stand for?
General Rehab Improvement Program, I think.
So it's for low-income folks. So,
How do low-income people access that?
We have all of our applications online, or they can contact our office and we can give them a hard copy. I believe we offer them in multiple languages, so people can come into our office or access those online.
How would they even know about them?
It depends. We do a lot of flyers. We advertise downstairs in the Housing Authority. Our offices are located in with the Housing Authority, so we can do flyers and different things like that.
so that's interesting because it kind of, I'm trying to get all my thoughts together on how to put this question. So that kind of program, and there are some other kinds of programs that we've seen, some agencies requesting funds for similar types of things. And one of the concerns that I have, I call it Christmas charity fatigue, where you've got multiple groups doing multiple toy drives and everybody's collecting stuffed teddy bears, and so kids get 5 different stuffed teddy bears from one organization, rather than working together, maybe pooling the money and buying them something else. So how, I mean, I guess, let me just say, I'd like to see us to try to be able to identify where alliances and collaborations and partnerships could kind of be pushed, you know, urged, merged together. And I'd like to see us do some of that kind of thing, because frankly, I think there's, in one organization, I know that the number of annual services they provide honestly, I was thinking, hiring an Uber driver to provide transportation would have been a cheaper alternative, So, and I'm not being disrespectful, but, sometimes we end up spending a lot of administrative money on, a low impact. But if we try to collaborate and bring together, and I'm wondering if the city's doing something like GRIP, and there are a couple of other programs doing, similar kinds of things, why all of them aren't working together?
We do. All those programs do. I can't vouch for every area of programs like that, but with rehab specifically, they do work really well with other agencies. Like, for example, Johnson County, I think they used, I could be saying this wrong, but I think it was ARPA to fund a rehab program. So they were able to get in touch with the city, and no one in Iowa City is going to be eligible for their program. So their program is going to cover the gap of the county there. Or, for example, another one we work with would be Habitat. They have some
Yes.
similar rehab programs, but where they can't meet maybe our federal requirements, maybe Habitat is able to do that. Or occasionally HACAP has different programs. Maybe they can, fill a need that the federal funds can't. So those partnerships are super helpful when we're seeing applicants that maybe don't meet the threshold for the federal requirements. We just have more, legal obligations and other sources of funding. So that is one instance where it is really nice to see the different agencies working together.
I think that's really great. One area that, wait a minute, I think I covered that a little bit in my questions to Bruce. It was about the ARPA money, so I think that's it.
Okay.
Questions I have.
Any other questions? Is everybody tired of city planning documents?
I didn't read through all the appendixes, but.
Most of the appendix, I didn't think to tell you when I was on the phone with you earlier. I was like, oh, I should have told her most of this document is the affordable housing plan. I think she's read already.
And get through this.
Yeah.
But, it was quite interesting, and to have the quiet time to be able to sit and read it, that, it's a good synopsis of what we're doing.
Yeah.
So it was kind of nice to see it.
To what Mayor Teague was saying too, we're also approaching a point where we're going to need to start the process for our next 5-year plan. And I think that's going to be really interesting because that is such an effort to get community feedback through all different sources. So thinking of what life was like in 2019 when we started this last process and everything that has happened in the last several years. So I think it's going to look really different. And I'm interested to see what that brings. But we'll start working on that soon. The city usually hires a consultant to help us with that just because it is such an undertaking to get that amount of public feedback. So that'll be on the horizon in the next year as well. Any other questions?
Great job.
Thank you. We'd be looking for a recommendation to council.
Now that we've seen the draft and heard about it, may I have a motion to recommend the FY24 annual action plan to City Council?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thanks.
Agenda item number 6, staff and commission updates. Are there any updates from staff or commissioners?
I'll just remind that we have, I sent an email that we have a reminder, we have our first Aid to Agencies Subcommittee, May 1 at 2 o'clock. Don't show up May 2nd at 1 o'clock, May 1 at 2 o'clock. And I'll send an agenda out next week and have a report next month. Caleb.
Awesome. I just had one quick update on the 11th. I went to accept that proclamation on our behalf, and so that all went well, and Mayor Teague was super, kind of like how he was tonight, he was super appreciative of the efforts that everyone puts in, so I just kind of wanted to share and extend that.
Yeah, that video's on YouTube if anyone wants to go watch it, and Caleb gave a very nice shout out to his fellow commissioner, so you should definitely check it out. I have just a couple updates unless there's...
I'll just have to excuse some of the flaws. I had like 2 hours of sleep. That's rough.
So, which YouTube channel? The Channel 4 one?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a question that this reminds me of. Last year, we made a point of having somebody watch or go to the commission meetings. Is that not something we need to do anymore? Or?
Honestly, that was a commission-generated idea. It was never anything that staff required of you. It's kind of one of those things, if you're interested in doing that and you want to bring it to the group, you can definitely give updates. If there's something going on that's super housing related or relevant to the commission, staff will always bring that to you, but.
And the next one there is though, right? They will be reviewing our recommendations for funding
Yes,
for
May 2nd.
legacy agencies, emerging agencies, and the home funds and public facilities, the four.
Yep. Yeah, we take all of that information with our annual action plan and do it at the same meeting, so that will be the May 2nd meeting.
What's the date of that?
May 2nd, 6:30, is it?
I think it's 6 now.
Easy to log on to watch them, if that's what you want to do.
Okay, May 2nd, at what time?
6 o'clock. I have just a couple other updates if anyone else. Okay. There's 3 terms ending in June. So Kieran, you filled a term that was expiring. So if we haven't scared you away, please reapply online. The application's good for 1 year. So Kieran, Nasser, and Kyle both have all have terms expiring in June. So if they want to reapply, we can do that online. The FY24 budget, we just covered that. That's going to council on May 2nd. April is for Housing Month. That's worth mentioning. There was a press release that went out by the Office of Equity and Human Rights. They do some different things every year, like they'll put some information on a person's fair housing rights. They'll do a insert in all the utility bills and mail it out to different people in Iowa City. There's also a video training online about fair housing that's available anytime. And then they're doing a film screening and panel discussion, a Matter of Place documentary, the film that shines a light on housing discrimination. And that is sponsored by Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition and Iowa Legal Aid. That will be Wednesday, April 26th on Zoom, and you can register online if you're interested in participating in any of that. Next meeting for HCDC will be May 18th. And
How do we get the link to go to that place to sign up?
I can email it to you. It's posted online too, but it's probably easiest if I just send it to you.
I get a lot of things.
I'd
Yeah.
like it to.
My email.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll include that in my follow-up. I signed up for that too. I think it sounds interesting.
Thank you.
And then my last update is just that you guys will get a break from all the funding rounds the next several meetings, so you can relax and enjoy thinking about some different topics, and we'll have some different agenda items. Then it's been a lot of funding rounds back to back lately, so we definitely appreciate your effort reading all that material. I know it's a lot of work, so just thanks for the work you do.
Now
That's
I
all
have
for me.
time to read the.
Now that you have time.
I struggle with getting it done in the wintertime, so.
Yeah, it's hard. That's all for me.
And then agenda item number 7, adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Adjourned.